Shalom everyone. We are continuing our limud of Sefer Shmuel Beis. We're up to Perek Yutes, and we're mamish in the middle of a very, very sad, tragic story. Avshalom, one of David HaMelech's sons, tried to depose David HaMelech and even kill him. And David fought back, but he gave strict instructions that Avshalom should not be hurt. But Avshalom got caught in his hair hanging from a tree as his mule rode from under him. And Yoav ben Tzeruiah and 10 of his soldiers killed Avshalom. And although there's a great, great victory and David is able to return to Yerushalayim, but David is consumed with grief and sadness over the death of his son Avshalom. And that's what Perek Yutes Pasuk Aleph says. Vayirgas HaMelech, the king was agitated. Vayal al aliyas hashar, and he went to the top of the gate. Vayefk, and he cried, he sobbed. V'kai amar belechta, and as he was walking, he said over and over, B'ni Avshalom, my son Avshalom, B'ni Avshalom, mi yitain musi ani tachtecha. If only I could have died instead of you. Avshalom, b'ni. I'll come back to this in a moment. Vayugad liYoav. And Yoav is informed that instead of this being a great simcha, a victory, a return to Yerushalayim, Hine HaMelech beicha, that the king is crying, Vayisabal al Avshalom, and he's mourning on Avshalom. Avshalom was a Rasha who wanted to kill David. V'atehi hateshua bayom ahu li'evel l'chol ha'am. So the great military salvation on that day turned into a day of sadness and mourning. Ki shama ha'am b'yomahu leimor natzaf hamelech al b'nai. Everybody who was really going to celebrate the nitzachon of David HaMelech over his enemies, they heard that the king is mourning, the king is sad over his son. Vayisganev ha'am b'yomahu lavai ha'ir. Kasher Yiskanev Ha'am Hanichlamim B'nusam B'milchama. So all of the crowds. Now remember, David actually is Aver Liyardain. David is in Machanayim, Aver Liyardain. He'll be returning to Yerushalayim later in the Perek. But all of the crowds that came to cheer him and welcome him, they kind of slinked away like a ganaf. They slinked away with embarrassment. The same way if an army had lost a war, they would be so ashamed. So everybody was even ashamed to be there. V'amelech lo ates panav, the king covered his face like an ovel. V'yizak hamelech kol gadol, and he started screaming, crying, B'ni Avshalom, Avshalom, B'ni. So here I want to go back. You'll notice that David said B'ni 8 times, if you count it. B'ni, in Pasuk Aleph, that's 3 times, and then at the end of the Pasuk, B'ni, that's 5 times. And then once again, we have in Pasuk Hey, B'ni, total of 8 times. The Gemara in Saita says that the first 7 times, every time David HaMelech mourned over B'ni, he brought his son up from one level of Gehenna. There are 7 levels of Gehenna. Avshalom was in the deepest. So the 7 B'nis brought him out of Gehenna, and the 8th B'ni brought him into Eilam Haba. This is how much David's, number 1, loved his son, even the son that wanted to kill him. And number 2, the great zechus of David HaMelech, that even such a Rasha as Avshalom he brought out of Gehenna, and he brought him to Eilam Haba. Now, we had mentioned before that in Harazaisim, in Nachal Kidron, the Kidron Valley between the Old City and Harazaisim, there is a monument that goes by the name Yad Avshalom. Most people say that is not the Yad Avshalom that Avshalom himself built. It's from a later time. We're not sure exactly. But for most of us, we don't regard this as a Makom Kadosh. We don't daven there. But it is said that Rav Chaim Shmulevitz used to love to be mispalel by the Yad Avshalom. And people said, what's going on? It's not Kivrei Tzadikim. Avshalom was a Rasha. So he said, you see from Avshalom the unconditional love that a Tati has for his child. That Avshalom wanted to kill him. And David says, I would rather die than have him die. And David had rachamim and love and took him out of Gehenna and brought him to Eilam Haba. So Rav Chaim would say this is a dugma and a mashal that we say to the Ribbono Shel Olam. Yes, maybe we're unworthy, maybe we're undeserving. But can't you have the rachamim on us that David had for his undeserving son Avshalom? And that is why Yad Avshalom was his Makayim, Rav Chaim's Makayim Tefillah. But be it as it may, the king is crying. What should have been a big simcha has turned into a day of mourning. And this annoys Yoav. Well, number one, Yoav was the guy who killed Avshalom. And number two, Yoav was the architect of this military victory. So he thinks he deserves a yashakayach. Vayava Yoav el HaMelech Abayis, and Yoav came into the house, Vayomer, and Yoav rebukes the king. Yoav says, Hayvashta hayayim es penei kol avadecha hamamaltim es nafshecha hayayim. You are humiliating all of the loyal servants who saved your life today. And not only did they save your life, but Avshalom wouldn't have stopped by killing you. Es nefesh banecha v'nosecha, he would have killed your sons and daughters, his brothers and sisters. V'nefesh noshecha, and your wives, v'nefesh pilagshecha, and your concubines. These are people who saved your life. And instead of congratulating them and celebrating with them, liava es sonecha, you have decided to love the enemies. V'lisno es ohavecha, and to hate those who cared about you. Ki higadeta hayom, because what you're saying today by your behavior, again, these are very strong words for Yoav to say to the king. Ki ein lecha sarim v'avadim. You don't care about your sarim, your officers, and your avadim. Ki yodati hayayim. Yoav says, I know very well. Ki lu Avshalom chai v'kulanu hayayim mesim. Ki az yashar b'yeinecha. Let's imagine Avshalom survived and all of us who cared about you. If we would be dead, you would be much happier. You care more about this guy who wanted to kill you than all the people who loved you and were meiser nefesh for you. V'ata, and now, he's talking to the king. Kum tzei v'daber alev avadecha. Get up and speak words of encouragement to your servants. Ki bashem nishbati. I swear by the name of God. Ki ein chayotze. If you don't go, if you keep on moping around, im yolin ish itcha halayla. There will not be a single. I will create a rebellion. There will not be a single person that will remain with you. By nightfall, v'ra lecha zeis mikol hara asher bo alecha minurecha ve'adata. And this is going to be worse for you than all of the tsarais that you suffered from the time you were a young man. As Yoav basically says, if I lead a rebellion, it's going to be successful. Nobody's going to be with you. Again, it's certainly a brazen tone. Vayokam HaMelech vayeshev bashar. And the king listens to the Musar. He gets up. He sits at the gate. This is in Machanayim, Ever Yardain. And the word spreads that the king has come out. Hinei HaMelech Yoshev bashar. The king has come out in the gate. Vayavai kalam of Hamelech, and all the people, again, obviously these are the people that sided with David. All the loyalists came, Yisrael nasi ishli ayalav. Masha'en came, the other people who were fighting against him, they ran away. Vayehi kala'am nadain b'chol shiftei Yisrael leimar. Now remember, just if you remember the situation here, most of the Shvatim had in fact fought on the side of Avshalom, and David essentially was protected by the people of his own Shevet Yehuda. But now that the rest of the nation sees that Avshalom was defeated and killed, and David is Melech, they too want to reconcile. So Pasuk Yud is telling us how the rest of Yisrael that had initially ran away, they want to come and recoronate or rededicate themselves to David. The people were all debating, and they said, this was the king that saved us from all of our enemies, the Philistines. And he had saved us from the Pelishtim. And he had to flee Eretz Yisrael and go over Yarden because of Avshalom. And we sided with Avshalom. But Avshalom Asher Mashachnu Aleinu. But the Avshalom that we had anointed as our king, Meis B'milchama, he died in the war. He was killed by Yoav and 10 of his soldiers. V'yata, Lama atem macharishim l'shivas hamelech. Why are we silent to go ahead and bring the king back? Meaning, let's go, let's cross the Yarden and bring the king back. Obviously, they're worried about not being condemned or punished as disloyal. Now, while the Anshe Yisrael on the West Bank in Eretz Yisrael proper are debating and arguing about whether they should go over Yarden to welcome David, David is not aware of this, but David sends a special message to Shevet Yehuda through the Kohanim Tzadok and Evyasar. V'amelech David shalach el Tzadok ve'el Evyasar Kohanim leimor. He sends a message to Tzadok and Evyasar. Dabru el Ziknei Yehuda, speak to the elders of Yehuda leimor, that they should send a special delegation. Lama siyu acharonim l'hashivas hamelech habeis. I'm sorry. It seems that David is aware that the Yisraelim from the other tribes want to create a whole welcoming group. So he sends a message to Anshe Yehuda that says, why should you be the last? You are my tribe. You are the people that fought for me. Lama siyu acharonim l'hashiv es hamelech el beiso. Why should you be the last people to bring the king back? Udavar kol Yisrael ba'al hamelech el beiso. And I hear word from all of the rest of Yisrael that they want to come here. But I want you to come here first. Achayatem, you are my brethren. You fought with me. You are my tribe. Atzmi ubetsari atem. You are my bone. You are my flesh. Lama siyu acharainim lahashiv es hamelech. Why should you be the last? So on one hand, we have the Anshe Yisrael who sided with Avshalom, but they want to come and welcome the king. But David wants the Anshe Yehuda to have a place of honor and a place of prominence, because after all, number one, they're his tribe. Number two, they were loyal to him. They fought for him. They were Meiser Nefesh for him. Now, another message that he sent was to Amasa. Now, Amasa, you will recall, is also David's nephew from his sister Abigail, just like Yoav and Avishai are his nephews from his sister Tzeruiah. You will recall, however, that Amasa became the general, lahavdil, like Robert E. Lee in the American Civil War. Amasa was the general that Avshalom took. So David is reaching out to Amasa, his nephew, who was a traitor. V'la Amasa taimru, speaking to Tzadok and Evyasar, tell Amasa that he shouldn't worry. Hello, atzmi ubesariata, you are my flesh and blood, or my bone and blood. It's a different. The English phrase is flesh and blood. The Hebrew phrase is my bone and my flesh. Ko yaseh elukim b'ko yosef, may Hashem punish me. Im lo sar tzava tiyeh lefanai kol hayomim tachas Yoav, if I will not make you a general. So essentially, this is the first time that David is expressing the fury that he has against Yoav for killing Avshalom. And he basically wants to replace Yoav with Yoav's cousin, Amasa. And he says, Amasa, you will be my general. And the pasuk says, Vayet es levav kol ish Yehuda ki ish echad. that the message that was sent turned the heart of Anshe Yehuda to come to David. Vayishlechu el hamelech, and the Anshe Yehuda indeed had a huge delegation that crossed the Yarden and went to Machanayim, and they said to David, let us return, you should return to Yerushalayim with all of your avodim. Vayashav hamelech v'yavad Yarden, and the king left Machanayim, and he came to the Yarden, and he's about to cross the Yarden. I guess at different times of the year, the Yarden's waters are low. There was no miracle like Yoshua of splitting the Yarden, but you could cross the Yarden on foot during the summer when the river channel is very shallow. V'Yehuda ba Gilgala, and all of Shevet Judah came to Gilgal. Now remember, Gilgal is west of the Yarden. That was the very first stop that the Yidden encamped in when they crossed the Yarden under Yoshua. So David is coming from the east, Machanayim. Anshe Yehuda are assembled in Gilgal, Loleches Likras Hamelech, to go and greet the king, Lahaver es Hamelech es Yarden, and to cross in other words, presumably, they were going to cross the Yarden and then bring the king over. Right, so that's the Anshe Yehuda. Now we have another person who joined the Anshe Yehuda, although he's not from Shevet Yehuda. Very interesting. Vayemaher Shimi ben Gera ben Hayamini asher mi Bachurim. Now, if you remember, we learned earlier that there was a man from the tribe of Binyamin whose name was Shimi ben Gera. He was actually an ancestor of Mordechai. Tribe of Binyamin, his town was Bachurim, again west of the Yarden. And when David was fleeing Yerushalayim, Shimi ben Gera cursed him, and Shimi ben Gera threw stones at him, saying, Hashem is punishing you for what you did to Shaul. And Yoav wanted to kill Shimi ben Gera as a merid b'malchus, and David said, if Hashem did not want me to be cursed and humiliated, it wouldn't have happened. Let Shimi alone. But now Shimi ben Gera sees that David is Menatzeach, so he's coming to be Mavakesh Mechila. Vayered im Ish Yehuda. He kind of stooped himself. He's not even part of Anshe Yehuda, but he pushed himself with the Anshe Yehuda, Likras HaMelech David, to greet the David HaMelech. V'elef ish imay b'minyamin. He even brought 1,000 people, like he brought other people to kind of make peace with David from Binyamin. And in addition, the unsavory character, we'll read more about him later, Tziva Nar Beisho. If you remember, there was a servant, an Eved of Mephibosheth, who was Yonasan's son, whose name was Tziva. And Tziva came to David and made up a story that Mephibosheth was a traitor, and which was a lie. We'll see this. And as a result, David gave Tziva all of Mephibosheth's wealth. So Tziva came with 15 of his sons, 20 of his avadim, Itai. V'tzolchu hayarden lefnei hamelech, and they crossed over the Yarden to bring the king across. V'avra ha'avara la'avir es Beis HaMelech, they crossed the Yarden to escort the king, the Beis HaMelech, v'laseis ha'tov v'einav, and to do whatever the king wanted. V'Shimi ben Gera nafal lifnei hamelech v'avra b'Yarden. When Shimi ben Gera crossed the Yarden, he fell on his face in front of the king to ask mechila. Vayomer el hamelech, he said to the king, Al yechashav li adoni avain, please do not hold me accountable for my sin. V'al tiskor eis asher ha'ava avdecha b'yayim asher yatsa adoni hamelech. Please do not remember the perversion, the sin that your servant committed the day that you left Yerushalayim, lasum hamelech el libay, that you should take it in your heart. Ki yada avdecha, I know, I'm your Eved, ki ani chatasi, I sinned, I had no right to do what I did, I was wrong. V'hinei basi hayayim rishain l'chol Beis Yosef. I have come, I am the first of Beis Yosef. Now again, the way it works is that there is Yehuda, which is Shevet Yehuda, they are David's loyalists. The rest of Am Yisrael, all the other tribes, are called Beis Yosef because the dominant Shevet was Ephraim and Manasseh. So all the tribes are called Beis Yosef, just as when later we have the kingdom of the 10 tribes, the kings come from Shevet Ephraim. So Shimi ben Gera is making the point, the Anshe Yehuda are here, but I am the very first of the rest of the tribes that were moirate against you to come and greet you. So, Yoav, for some reason, is not involved in this one, maybe because he's very angry that David wants to replace him with Amasa. But Yoav has a brother, Avishai, who's like second in command. Vayan Avishai ben Tzeruya, Avishai ben Tzeruya says to David, why are you allowing this Shimi ben Gera to kind of be welcome here? Hatachas ois liyuma Shimi? Because of this, Shimi shouldn't die? Kilel es Mashiach Hashem, he cursed you that are the anointed king of Hashem. So Vayomer David. So David says to Avishai, he didn't talk to Yoav, but Ma li v'lachem b'nei Tzeruya. So it's as if he's also bringing in Yoav here. What is it between you and me, sons of Tzeruya? Ki siu li hayayim l'satan. That this day, which is a day of victory and a day of celebration, you are a Satan. Satan meaning you're accusing people. You want me to punish people. Hayom yumas ish Israel. Do we need another Jewish person to be killed today? Ki alo yadati ki hayom ani melech al Yisrael. I know that Hashem has given me back the Malchus. I've gotten everything I wanted to get. I've gotten everything I need. We have to go around killing people? Now, indirectly, I would suggest, there's also this teichacha, why did you kill Avshalom? Although David does not say it directly, maybe it's too painful to say directly. Vayomer HaMelech al Shimi. And the Melech says to Shimi, Loi Tamus, you will not die. Vayishav lo HaMelech. And the king made a shavua that Shimi would not be killed, although we will see that after David's death, Shlomo did kill Shimi ben Gera. Okay. Now, so we have Shimi ben Gera with 1,000 people. We have the Eved Siva shows up. But in addition, Mephibosheth. Now it says Mephibosheth, the son of Shaul. It's actually not the son of Shaul. Mephibosheth is the son of Yaina's son, the son of Shaul. If you remember, Mephibosheth was lame. He couldn't walk very well. And he wanted to go to David all the way back at the beginning of the rebellion with Avshalom, but Siva snuck away before Mephibosheth could come. But Mephibosheth finally shows up, limping. I think Siva was probably surprised. Yarad likras hamelech. And Mephibosheth was in a state of grief and a state of mourning. Lo yasa raglav. He did not cut his toenails. V'lo yasa sefamo. He did not trim his mustache, so that it was very straggly. V'yes begadav lo kibes. He did not launder his garments. He was like a mourner. Lemin hayayim lechas hamelech ad hayom sheba b'shalom. From the time that the king left Yerushalayim till the king comes back, Mephibosheth was in mourning. Vayiki ba Yerushalayim likras hamelech. When he came to Yerushalayim, because he couldn't go further than that, to greet the king as the king was returning to Yerushalayim, because he's now crossed the Yarden. V'yom lo hamelech. So the melech, who had the information that Mephibosheth was a traitor, Lama loy halachta imi Mephibosheth. Why didn't you come to me? Why were you a loyalist to Avshalom? Vayaymar. And Mephibosheth said to David, Adoni HaMelech Avdi Rimani, my servant Siva tricked me. Ki Amar Avdecha, I, your servant, said to Siva, Echba Shaliach Hamor, I want to saddle my donkey, V'erkavel, and I want to ride on the donkey, V'elechas HaMelech, I want to go with the Melech. But I couldn't travel by myself, Ki Piseach Avdecha, because I am lame. V'yiragel B'Avdecha L'Melech. And Siva, my servant, said Lashon Hara, Matzi Shemra, about me. Adaini HaMelech Kamalach Elokim. But you, my master, are as great in my eyes as an angel of Hashem. Aseh atayv b'einecha. Whatever you want to do to me, I accept. And now he makes the point. Why is he so grateful? Ki lo haya kol beis avi ki amanshe mavis ladoni hamelech. The truth of the matter is, David could have eradicated all of Shaul's house to solidify his rule. You could have killed us all. And yet, Vatashes es avdecha bi'echle shulchanecha. You made me your lowly servant, able to eat at your table and be part of your household. Uma yesh li oid tzedakah v'lizoik oid el hamelech. How could I ask for more charity and chesed and to complain? So whatever you did, because of Tzivos Moitzi Shemra, giving him my property, I'm not going to complain. Those of you that have very good memories of the Machzor might recall, Uma yesh od tzedakah v'liz, ma yesh lanu, it says od tzedakah v'lizoik es hamelech, actually appears in the Chazaras Hashatz of the Musaf of Yom Kippur at the end of the Seder Avodah. This pasuk was buried. What can we ask for from Hashem? V'yomer lei hamelech, and the Melech said, Lama sedaber oid devarach. You don't have to keep on talking. I understand that you were tricked. Amarti, and therefore I hereby declare, Ata v'tziva tachlaku es hasada. That instead of Tziva getting all of your property, you and Tziva should split your property. Now the emes is, this is very, very schwer. If David is now informed that Tziva was a liar, and the only reason Tziva got any of the property was because David thought that Mephibosheth was a traitor, so now that he discovers Mephibosheth was tricked, and Mephibosheth was in fact loyal, he shouldn't say, oh, you'll get half. He should have taken everything away from Tziva, instead of saying, you and Tziva are going to split. So there seems to be an inyan, it's not so clear here. Either David was not sure if Mephibosheth is telling the truth, which is a little schwer. Why would he trust Tziva over Mephibosheth? Or there's a concept that when a king is geyser, like we have with Achashverosh, you can't be chayzer, and therefore there had to be a kiyum to that original chalukah. But the emes is, the pasuk is takashver. V'yaymer Mephibosheth says, I don't even care. El HaMelech. Gam es hakol yikach. Let him have everything. Acharei asher ba Adoni HaMelech b'shalom el beisai. As long as the king is home safely, that's all that makes me happy. I don't care about the property. Now, as far as we know, Mephibosheth Lamaisa did get half, but he says, I don't even care if I would get nothing. Okay, so that's Mephibosheth. Now we have another person. So again, David is coming back to Yerushalayim, and what is happening is different people are coming with him or coming to greet him. And the next person is Barzillai Hagiladi. Now, Barzillai Hagiladi is a man from Aver Liyarden, and you'll recall we read in the last perek that when David was in Machanayim, Barzillai Hagiladi gave him and David's whole army food and supplies and furniture and beds and cushions and pillows. And Barzillai Hagiladi actually crossed the Yarden to escort David back to Yerushalayim. Vayavor es hamelech hayarden, l'shalcha hayarden. And he actually crossed the Yarden towards Yerushalayim to escort the king. Now, the pasuk then mentions this was not an easy thing for him. Barzillai was very, very old, ben Shemainim Shana. So actually the emes is, although Baruch Hashem, Shemainim is old, but we wouldn't automatically describe it as Zakein Mi'ait. But it mentions that Barzillai actually looked much older than he actually was, because he had lived a life of Zanus. He was not that moral in terms of his sexual proclivities, and that aged him even more than Shemainim. But he had one big zechus. V'hu chilkal et hamelech b'shivaso b'machanayim. He supported the king, and the king doesn't just mean the king, but all of the king's army, when they were dwelling in Machanayim, Aver Liyarden. Ki ish gadol hu mi'ayid, he was a very wealthy man. Vayomer hamelech el Barzillai, and the melech said to Barzillai, Ata avor iti, now that you have crossed the Yarden with me, I want to take care of you in your retirement. Live in my palace in Yerushalayim, and I will take care of you. Vayomer Barzilai el HaMelech. Barzilai says to the king, Kama yemei shnei chayai ki elas HaMelech Yisrael. How much longer am I going to live? I'm towards the very end of my life. I don't need to move or to go to a new place. Ben shmeinim shana nechiyam. I'm 80 years old. Ho'eda ben taiv l'ra. Do I know the difference between good and bad? That means good food or bad food, meaning all of the royal fancy food that you're going to serve me. I can't taste anyway. Im yintam avdeches asher eichel v'asher eshta. Do you think I even taste that which I eat and that which I drink? Im eshma oid b'koil sharim v'sharais. My hearing is not good. Do I hear the beautiful sounds of those who sing, whether it's male singers or female singers? Again, the reference to sharot will obviously be a little bit of a problem because of the Iser of Shmias Kol Isha. So either Barzilai is not connected to that halacha, so he's Meshukin Znus anyway, so he mentions that, or Trei Kololo Mishtame. Again, I'm not going to get into the halachas. If many voices are singing, maybe it'll be mutter. But there is a reference here to Kol Sharim V'Sharot, so those who are ma'ayin in halacha could ponder exactly how could that be permitted. Why should I be a burden to the king? I'll just be a burden on you. Kimat Yavor Avdecha Yarden Samelach. I will cross the. You have just crossed the Yarden, and I've crossed it with you. But Lama Yigmaleni Hamelech Hagmula Hazais. I don't need anything more. Yashavna Avdecha V'Amos Be'iri. Let me return, and I will die in my city. Im Kever Avi V'Imi. Kind of very touching. And I will be buried in the graves next to my father and mother. However, I have a son who's Kimham. His name is Kimham. V'hinei avdecha Kimham. Yavar Madoni Amelech. He will cross with you to Yerushalayim. Again, it's a little uncertain. The picture I have is they've already crossed the Yarden, and then Barzilai is going to go back. Some psukim imply they haven't yet crossed the Yarden, so it's not so pashut either way. But he says, my son Kimam will cross with you. V'yasei lo es asher tov b'necha, and you can reward him as in accordance with what is good in your eyes. Vayomer hamelech iti yavar Kimam, v'ani eser lo es hatayv b'yeinecha. Kimam will come with me, and I will do whatever you want me to do for him. Whatever you put upon me, I will do for you. I will do for Barzilai. So now the pasuk says, "Vayavar kolam es Yarden." So again, you could translate this: now they crossed the Yarden, or they had already crossed the Yarden. That would be the shaila if they already crossed. Hamelech avar, vayisha kamelech leBarzilai. The king kissed Barzilai. Vayivaracheu, he blessed him. Vayashov limkaimai, and Barzilai returned to his town, Aver Liyarden. And now the king arrives at Gilgal. Again, Gilgal is a very important place. This was the first place that the Yidden encamped when they crossed the Yarden, Bimei Yoshua. V'chimhan, so he was called Kimham, now he's called Chimhan with the nun. Avar Imai was with David. V'chal am Yehuda, together with all of Yehuda, Haviru et Hamelech, v'gam Chatzi Am Yisrael, and half of the rest of Am Yisrael was with him as well. But now they're fighting, because remember, the rest of Am Yisrael wanted to be the ones to welcome the king first, but Yehuda seized the moment and took the first opportunity. So now the Ish Yisrael, which, in a way, what's their taina? They were loyal with Avshalom. But the Ish Yisrael comes, El HaMelech, v'yomer El HaMelech, Madua genavucha achenu Ish Yehuda. Why did the Ish Anshe Yehuda steal our moment? V'yaviru es HaMelech v'es Beiso es HaYarden, and they were the ones that crossed you over. V'chol Anshe David Imo, and your people. We should have had that right, because we're the majority. Vayan kol ish Yehuda al ish Yisrael, And the Anshe Yehuda said to the Anshe Yisrael, who are now saying, we should have been the ones that brought you over, Ki Karev HaMelech Elai. The king is closer to us than he is to you. V'lama zeh chara lecha ala davar hazeh. And why are you angry? Ha'achol achalnu min hamelech. Did we eat the king's food? Did we take something away that would have gone to you? Im nisas nislan. Did he give us any gifts? We're just showing our covet because we're closer to him. Vayan ish Yisrael es ish Yehuda. But the Anshe Yisrael said to the Anshe Yehuda, Vayomer, Eser yadais li b'melech, v'gam b'David ani mimcha. You are one tribe. We are 10 tribes. Again, we're not counting Shevet Levi, which are Kohanim. We have 10 parts of the king. You have 1 part of the king. Umadua hakilosani. Why have you shamed us, treated us as if we don't count? V'lo haya devari rishonli l'shivis malki. That so all of a sudden they're so loyal to David. A few days ago they were fighting with Avshalom. Why did we not have the first opportunity to bring our king back? And there was a very, very bitter machlokas, and the pasuk says, "Vayikash devar ish Yehuda midvar ish Yisrael." And the words of Yehuda became harsher and harsher over the words of Yisrael. So there was a mamish. And so on this very day, there once again is a bitter machlokes among the tribes. The Anshe Yehuda are essentially saying, David is our king. And Anshe Yisrael is saying, we have more of a connection to him because we are 10 of the tribes and you are only a single tribe. So we leave the Perek in the middle of a very, very bitter machlokas. And amazingly enough, this is going to cause yet another rebellion against David. The tribes just got over being with Avshalom, but now that they think that David is going to favor Yehuda and not treat them with kavod and respect, once again there will be another man that's going to lead a rebellion against David on the very day that David returns to Yerushalayim in apparent triumph. Ad kan.